Hey, friends, I'm Otis Gibbs, and this is my buddy Barry Walsh. He's going to share some stories about touring with Waylon Jennings.
He was a total card player all the way. He wanted to play cards with his posse around him, and I never got into that. That was kind of the long term guys that had been with him, that wanted to play. But I was kind of outside that circle most of the time, and I wasn't a card player, so I didn't really push that side of him. But as far as what he was like, out in public, people would come up to him for autographs, and if he was eating, he would put them off because that's kind of not cool to do. That's somebody if they're eating and bug them for an autograph. He let them know that, but he was gracious with people, and he would sign autographs, whenever he needed to. I mean, he wasn't one of those guys that stayed outside of the bus for 4 hours signing autographs. I mean, more than once I heard him say, "Look, he'd say, Hoss, my only job is to get up there and sing my songs, and sign autographs is not part of the job description." But he was kind enough to do it. Well, if you think about a song like "Good Hearted Woman," that is it. It's 1 5 1 5 on the bass, 1 5 1 5, all the way through, pretty much. And it's driving and it's relentless, and that was it. And between the bass and the drums, it drove the beat and created that beat that became the Waylon beat. The Waylon groove. It's similar actually to Don Williams, to his thing too, because Don's was a little bit is this basically the same thing, but a little bit folkier and a little bit slower. Less driving.
Austin City Limits was a big, big deal right around then.
Big deal. Yeah. I don't remember much, honestly. I really don't. When I see it now, you know, I know I'm there, but I just don't have a lot of memories about it, except being excited to do that gig. That it was even back then. We're talking about 30, 35 years ago. Such a big thing. To even play it. They still see that show, and they still tell me that. I mean, a couple of months ago, somebody told me they saw that show. Was that you playing on that thing? I said, yeah. Many, many years ago. Yeah. But I mean, I don't remember details because there were so many kind of gigs like that I did with him over the years. I remember doing like the Universal Amphitheater in LA. That was a great gig. I remember playing the Forum in LA, opening for Hank Jr. That was, mind blowing, really. And it was gigs like that, high profile gigs like that I remember. Gigs with Willie, playing his Picnic and this and that. After I left the band, well, I'll tell you the two most important things that ever happened between me and Waylon that I remember that are crystal clear in my mind. One of them was when I went to his house to tell him that I was leaving, and I was terrified. I drove out to his house, knocked on the door, and we had a great relationship. We used to hang out a lot. I used to just drive out there and stop at his house and shoot the shit. But I went out there that one day, and I'm sure he knew that, this was probably it. But I sat down in the den with him, and I said, it's time for me to move on. And I was just like trembling, trembling in my boots about having to tell him this. And he just looked at me in the eye and he said, Hoss, you're doing the right thing. And I was so relieved to hear that. I knew that I was doing the right thing at that point. He felt it too. The other time was, and this happened a few years after I was gone. It was the day Keith Whitley died, and I was crushed. I knew he was because he loved Keith Whitley. So I was out on my way out to my house in Franklin, and I stopped by Waylon's house, knocked on the door. Jessie answered the door, and she said, "Yeah, go on in. He's in the den." So I went to the den. We sat down on the couch and watched the local news for an hour or two about Keith. And at one point I remember he looked at me and he said, Hoss, that was the greatest country singer ever. He was gutted. He was really, really upset about that death, as a lot of us were. Yeah. Well, I remember hearing that they amputated his foot first. And I thought, well, that's going to be the end, because as alive as that guy was, and as much as he loved getting around and this and that, I thought, when he loses that mobility, he's not going to last long. And it was about 6 weeks later And then I heard, I can't even remember how I heard, but it didn't really surprise me that much because I knew I'd been hearing he wasn't well. And, I just knew that it wasn't going to be long. Yeah, but still super sad. I still communicate with Jessie every once in a while, once or twice a year. I'll send her an email, and she's out in Phoenix. I loved hearing the stories from Waylon about his early days in Phoenix, because he became a star in Phoenix. I forget the name of the club, but it was this huge country club that he kind of took over, and that was the springboard. I think Bobby Bear saw him out there and brought him to the attention of Chet Atkins, and he got signed to RCA in the beginning. But he had great stories about the Indian reservations in those days. And he would always tell me and other people that really he called them the Indians. He said they kept me alive for several winters. And he would go out and do gigs on the reservation, and they loved him. The reservations like the Hopi and Navajo, especially the Navajo. I played window rock with him once, the capital of the Navajo Nation. And he really had this heartwarming affiliation with the Indians and with Native Americans all the way through. And that song "America" that he cut, the red man is right to expect a little from you, a promise and then follow through. He wasn't his song, but he recorded it because that's what he felt, and he was always so grateful that they supported him. We were out there playing at Window Rock, and I remember he was in the dressing room, and this really big Native American guy with his wife came in. And he said, "Waylon," and he called him Waylon. And he said, "You take a picture with me and my wife?" And Waylon said, "Sure, Hoss, I'll take a picture." And then the guy said, "Well, Waylon, you got camera?" And Waylon cracked up, and he would tell that story all the time. This is before cell phone pictures, Pretty funny. But it was really moving for me to get to see Window Rock and to see the Navajo reservation. That's one of the greatest things about doing those tours with him, was seeing things that I would never see otherwise. He did a fair amount of casinos and then theaters and this and that. I do remember he got the offer to play in Branson, and he played there one time, and he said, "That's it, I'm not doing this anymore." He refused to play in Branson.
That's understandable.
Yeah, didn't go well with the outlaw image. Had to be cognizant of that. But one of the main things I will always remember about Waylon was his embracing of great songs and songwriters. And I really regret that he never got a chance to meet my wife, Gretchen, because he died before we got together. And I always tell her, I said, he would have loved you, and he would have. He was such a champion of the songwriter and great songs. I remember him playing like Kevin Welch songs for the first time and then recording them and things like that. He opened my eyes to that world too. Great songs. I got a song recorded by him once, and that was one of the thrills of my life. And the moment when he called me and he said, "Hoss, come over here and listen to this song. We just cut your song." And so I went over there to Soundstage, and he played it back for me, and I was just like blown away. One of the highlights of my life. I couldn't hardly contain myself.
If you'd like to hear more Waylon Jennings stories, just click on the link in the upper right-hand corner of your screens and tell me down below what your favorite Waylon Jennings song is. Subscribe to this channel, and I'll see you somewhere down the road. Much love to you.